Hello, 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 and welcome to a brand new episode of Three Drams. How are you doing? As always, I am Potstill Matt, and I will be your host for this fantastic evening. I am delighted for you all to be able to join us here for episode 24. That means it's 2 years on the air, guys. A very big thank you, of course, as always, to the guys from Irish Malts, who are the brain people behind Three Drams, who of this, nothing could be done without them. As I said, I do the easy job. I just show up once a month and talk to you fantastic people. They're the ones in the background putting everything together, the packs, the sourcing, getting things across the world and to your doors for these fantastic shows. I am super excited to be with you this evening for this tasting, because what we are tasting this evening is a round of the world's best new make Irish spirit over the last 3 years. So let me give you a little bit of background, how this is all going to go, why we're even tasting these. And in the comment section, do let us know where you're joining us from, because I'm seeing so many familiar faces this evening, and I'm seeing some new ones as well. I'm seeing people from Galway and Schneem, and we get people in from Crete. And of course, we have our lovely German contingent with us. As always, couldn't miss our lovely friendly friends from Germany. But why are we tasting a load of new make? Why are these not lovely aged and yellow as we're used to? Well, what we're doing this evening is that 3 years ago, the World Whiskey Awards, which is, there's thousands of awards for spirits in the world, but the World Whiskey Awards is kind of the hallmark gold standard for really any whiskey companies out there. They created a new category, which was new make and young spirit. And this is to showcase the new spirit that's coming out of all the different countries that produce whiskey around the world. So this is all whiskey new make spirit. And in this, the last 3 years, of course, there was an Irish winner every year, but in the last 3 years, single pot still has won every single year. And it's fantastic to see the evolution of the pot still, the recipes, the mash bills, and it's going up against all the best single malt spirits in the country, but pot still is killing it. And that's what we're doing here tonight. We're showcasing the 2020, the 2021, and the 2022 winners of Ireland's Best New Make Spirit, and they are joining us this evening. And that's why we're tasting this, because we're tasting the creme de la creme of the future of Irish whiskey. Now, on your card, it does say 1, 2, 3 if you're tasting along with us, with Boann up first, but I'm throwing caution to the wind, and I'm going to bring Clonakilty on first. So number 2 is going to be where we're starting, and the reason behind this is I want to taste them in the chronological order that they won the awards. So we're going to go a little different, a little against the grain, but I think it'll be kind of a fun way to do it and bring us through an annual progression of these spirits. And I do want to say hello to people in the comment section, because I'm seeing there's lovely amount of people. The engagement tonight in the comment section, it's on fire. I'm seeing, of course, our friends in lovely California, Gary saying hello. We have friends in from Maynooth. Of course, Tina in from Germany, always the first person into the comment section as well. People coming from all over. Kevin O'Connell coming in from Germany again as well. So we've got even bigger German contingent. And of course, we have our walk of friends from Schneem, from West Kerry. So I'm always excited to see those familiar faces and the new ones. But look, literally no one comes here to listen to me babble on about all of our friends in high and low places. We come here to talk to and listen to and taste lovely whiskey and new make spirit. So as always, if you have any questions, this is your time to ask. These are the flavor makers and creators. So we're going to have them sitting right in front of you. This is where you're going to want to ask the questions. We will have a bundle for you at the end, a discounted bundle that John in Irish Malts has put together. Obviously, these new make spirits, I think only one is commercially available. So this is something a little bit different, but keep an eye if you're a 3 Drams member in your inbox for at the end of the show, because that's what will be dropping into you. But this is the 2-year anniversary. It's one of the most exciting tastings I think we've ever put together. So why not stop me yammering and let's go into, we're going to start with Dram number 2, which is Clonakilty's new make spirit. And I am delighted to welcome Oisin Mulcahy, head distiller from Clonakilty, to the show. Oisin, how are you doing? Welcome.
Matt, how's it going? Good to be here.
Well, I am delighted to have you. I'm going to just show this to the camera again. We're doing Dram number 2 first, because I'm going to go a little rogue here, but I wanted to bring you guys on first and talk about the Clonakilty New Make Spirit. For those who don't know you, why don't you give us a 15-second rundown of yourself, Oisin, and then let's jump into the New Make Spirit. I'm gonna fill up my glass a little bit here. So
yeah, no problem. So obviously, I suppose the first things first. I suppose I'll have to honor my predecessor. I'm very new in this role, so obviously when this prestigious award was won by Clonakilty in 2020, it was the from the good work of Paul Corbett, the head distiller that was in place at the time. So in many ways, he kind of got the plant up and running here in Clonakilty and kind of formulated the first kind of pasta recipe that we produce and first spirit. And obviously, I'm here to take credit for it, so it's always good. But yeah, so I took over as head distiller here in June. So I'm pretty much just in the door myself and kind of familiarizing myself with the distillery and everything. The new make is probably my most. I'm most familiar with Clonakilty's new make, having seen it won the in 2020, and I suppose that kind of, it's always good when you join a distillery with such a good reputation, So it's and when you're working with spirits of such good quality, you kind of have a good future ahead of you.
Exactly. Well, I mean, we're here. You were the first distillery in Ireland to win this award with the World Whiskey Awards. Obviously, a huge deal at the time. I'm sure the Scully family, who own and operate the distillery, must have been elated with it. So the new make we have in our glass, if people have poured it, because I have my glass ready here, people like to jump ahead of me. 63.5% ABV. Why don't you run? I'm going to stick my nose in it. I'm going to have a little sip. Why don't you run through what the mash bill is and how you guys produce it down there, and what kind of makes it unique in your eyes?
So this is essentially what we kind of, I suppose, commissioned the plant on. It's the simplest pot still mash bill you can kind of essentially attempt in some ways. The 50-50 mash bill, so barley to malt, and it kind of gave us a great tester as far as what was potentially possible, as far as we didn't want to maybe commit in the early days to a heavy barley component in case the equipment, it wouldn't be able to handle it or whatever. So our kind of equipment is fairly mash tun, lauter tun kind of system, so nothing particularly new or different, no mash filters or anything like that. So I suppose our main challenge with our pot still was to try to, make it. We don't actually have in Clonakilty, we don't have the option at the moment to do interesting adjuncts other than barley and malt. So we were looking at kind of ways to make the spirit something special. And I suppose the thing that kind of stood out to me when I first joined was the fermentation time. So for me, I think it all comes back to a really good, like, obviously distillation is very important in creating a good quality distillate, and we kind of running the stills nice and slow and kind of and easy. But I feel our new make spirit is really the key to it is it's its fermentation time. So we do almost sometimes over 100-hour fermentation, which is kind of unusual for most distilleries. And I think on the nose, you kind of get straight away the esters that are kind of popping straight away. That fermentation time will usually produce a much deeper range of fruity kind of aromas, which comes from essentially, for want of a better term, a secondary conversion in the fermenter, which is, yeast will have done its thing within the first, say, 72 hours. Between the 50 and 70 hours, you would have other organisms, other bacteria, for want of another word, having their say in the production of acids like acetic acid and lactic acid, which which doesn't sound great if you're brewing beer, but from a distiller's perspective, these are the kind of precursors for really interesting fruity esters once it ends up in the cask. So I suppose
I'll just jump in for 1 second.
Yeah.
I apologize. I see Mike D in the comment section. No, Mike, you've not missed the first dram. I've gone a bit rogue. We're going to start with number 2 just because we're tasting the spirits in order how they won the awards. I decided to change it up at the last minute. So no, you haven't missed anything. Oisin, why don't we have a little, say, sláinte. I'm going to have a little sip of this here now. I'm going to take our first sip. If anyone hasn't tasted it yet, feel free, dive in with us. Let us know your thoughts. Obviously, a very expressive spirit. There's a lot going on. Are there characters that you've seen that the distillery has in terms of its spirit? Is there something that you and the distillery team kind of think the spirit, like the kind of the DNA of the spirit should taste like?
I think we're kind of getting to that point where we're sort of identifying those kind of markers at the moment. One of the things I think we've all kind of identified over the different mash bills that we've done is that particular, that sweet grass hay-like quality, and that kind of an interesting licorice linger on the tongue, which is really, really interesting. For me, like straight away on the nose, I get those red currants and forest fruit kind of things. And it's particularly noticeable when you're filling the cask and you get that waft of marry of flavors between say a bourbon barrel and the new make coming through. And it really kind of gives you, I know it's not very scientific, but it gives you a very kind of a glimpse into the future maybe. So it's really having such a good base spirit. And of course, all our distillers we make all our cuts by organoleptic kind of assessment of the spirit and everything like that. So it's something that we kind of take pride in the sense that we know when the spirit's off, when it's within range. And I think at the moment we're trying to identify that kind of distillery character, like you said, and try to nail that down. And I think that'll become more apparent when we start disgorging our own whiskey in a couple of years' time and start to assess what the mature stock is. And you can start to see how that distillery character is kind of shining through the maturation period as well.
So this spirit is 50% malted barley, 50% unmalted barley, triple distilled. This is I'm assuming it's a recent draw from one of your distillation runs.
Yeah.
63.5%. I suppose for you in the distillery, you said that this was kind of one of the first mash bills that you ran in the distillery. Is it still in circulation? Do you do others, or is the world's best Irish new make for 2020 the one you ran with?
Yeah, so like I suppose it's a strange one because because they, Clonakilty won with this one at 50-50, you'd imagine they'd be tempted to kind of go, okay, let's just stop there, 50-50, we've nailed it. But I suppose the team were still eager to kind of test the kind of range of what the distillery can produce. So at the moment, we're actually running 60-40 barley to barley, 60% barley, 40% malt. And it's amazing the variation, the difference. Usually we will do 50-50. We'll mix it up the whole time. I'm kind of really looking forward to getting my teeth in there and kind of experimenting with different mash bills. Like I mentioned, we're in the process of kind of adding experimenting with other adjuncts as well, and kind of broadening the flavor profile a little bit. But other things like yeast as well is something I like to experiment with, and everything to make our spirit a little bit different. It may come to a point where you come back to the classic, to what you realize really was the simple is best kind of a thing. But no, we try to broaden our kind of our spirit as much as possible.
Absolutely. So when you mentioned there that you're looking forward to when you're taking the new make the aged spirit out of the cask. The distillery spirit's already hit 3. I think it was in May you celebrated that milestone. Is this spirit? Are we going to see this? Is this what's going to be in the first release in? You mentioned a couple of years' time. Is this what we're going to be seeing in its aged form?
Yeah, for the most part, it'll be a 50-50, because that was essentially what we were running in the early days. But yeah, so it'll be kind of a blend of different mash bills up until that point, moving forward through for next year and the year after. But it's yeah, like you said, our 3-year-old whiskey just turned there in May, just before I arrived on scene. And so it's giving us a real glimpse of what the potential is in the future, and it's also giving us some food for thought for what other cask finishes and maturation potential we can utilize to kind of complement these flavors, because like you said, it is quite a fruit forward, very estery, very kind of expressive. So we want something that kind of doesn't overshadow that, because that's, the new make category, I suppose. Like, obviously it's a bit of a novelty in many ways, because people up until recently don't really appreciate the unmature spirit, because they just assume 90 or more % of the whiskey character comes from the cask. And while the cask has a major impact, I think we're finally kind of getting to that point where we're appreciating the importance of a good quality new make will give you at least some, if not quite a bit of kind of additional kind of quality as it matures through.
Absolutely. And I mean, for me, already sitting down with this, it's really no surprise for me to see that pot still has won all 3 years so far, and I'm fully expecting it to kind of keep that trend going. For the new makes side, there's so much flavor with the kind of mixed mash bill compared to the, I say a lot of people, you mentioned that people don't drink unmatured spirit all too often, which is very fair. But if you have tried any new make in other, in distilleries or on distillery tours, or if you're nerdy enough to, like me, go out and buy bottles of new make when you see it, usually you're tasting malt, which will have particularly in new make, will have a very different flavor profile. There's so many flavors going on through this new make. I assume you find through the other recipes that you're doing, the 60-40s and the 40-60s and the 50-50s you're doing, I'm assuming you're seeing a very interesting variation in those flavors, even within the single pot still category.
Yeah, I mean, that's the exciting thing about it, I suppose, when you're just dealing with two ingredients essentially, and you're playing around with those ratios. It just gives you such kind of scope for, before you even add in your oats or your wheat or your rye, before you even get to those additional grains, you're just the variation you'll have between that ratio of barley to malt is the possibilities are endless, really. And again, I think adjusting fermentation times and distillation cuts is something experimenting with, as far as changing in cuts based off of the actual mash bill, and how that comes through in the spirit is kind of an interesting one, because you can't really assume to run your distillery the exact same way when your chemical composition, say, of your feed is actually different. So it's something we've noticed, really, that those subtle and also not so subtle changes between something as simple as changing the ratio of barley to malt.
So for a man that has distilled malt whiskey and now is exclusively distilling pot still whiskey in Clonakilty, because I don't think a lot of people will realize that there's no malt yet to be made in Clonakilty. It's a 100% single pot still distillery. What does it mean to you? Like, what excites you about the category? When you're going in and you're talking to the other distillers, you're talking to other head distillers like I'll be talking to this evening. What does pot still mean to you? Does it stand out? Is it a pain in the ass? Is it more fun to work with? Because a lot of people know malt, and I don't know if we pay a lot of attention to the making of pot still.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. Sometimes you think of the all malt distilleries or in Scotland or whatever, and you just realize just in many ways just how easy the system must be for them. But yeah, no, I mean, pot still I feel like is rightfully so becoming Ireland's sort of flag to fly. I think it's our kind of national expression of whiskey, and I think it's very important that we kind of keep that going. And it's not just for some sort of differentiation between us and Scotland. I think it's there for a reason. It's there because it actually is on its own a kind of a really fantastic product, and I think that you can see the world opening up to that. And I think it gives me great pride, I suppose, as a distiller coming up and in Ireland to kind of be at the forefront of this new wave of kind of pot still distilleries, and to kind of really kind of continue that tradition going forward. And also from a technical distillery perspective, it is more challenging, and that's what makes it interesting for everyone, I think, here at the distillery as well, to produce. Malt is easy in comparison, so it's definitely a challenge, but it's one we wouldn't have it any other way, really.
If somebody is in the lovely Wild Atlantic Way of West Cork, is there anything in the distillery that you think people should look out for? Maybe it's different to other distilleries. And also remember, guys, we have 3 guests this evening, so if you've got questions for Oisin, get them into the comments section right now. But yeah, Oisin, anything people should keep an eye out for when they're walking through your setup?
Well, I think it's a unique distillery, really. Even if you've ever been to Clonakilty, you just walk through the town, and in what used to be an old bank, you just bang there. It's a distillery like plopped right in the middle of a town, of a busy tourist town. So just the site on its own, like you see people stopping outside to take pictures of it, not knowing what it is, kind of a thing, So it is just a kind of an anchor for the town in general. So it's just a beautiful distillery just to walk around in. But in particular, I think its layout is very interesting. It's very, I can imagine from a tourist perspective, you get a real intimate look inside how a distillery is run. You're literally on the floor right next to the distillers. You can usually pull them aside and ask them a question or whatever. It's a really kind of,
whether they want you to or not.
Well, for most cases, they want you to. There's a few might run out the back door, but most of them are pretty open. And you don't get that everywhere. Usually people, especially in the more modern distilleries, not that Clonakilty isn't a modern distillery, it's actually quite automated, but they still have that sense of kind of very important to see the distillers at work and kind of be able to ask them questions, and to be able to not hidden behind in a control room anywhere or anything like that. So it's an important part of Clonakilty Distillery, I think.
So Kevin is wondering if Clonakilty will exclusively be producing single pot still whiskey.
As far as I'm concerned, right now, that's the only thing on our radar. Obviously, we'll produce what ultimately the kind of what we feel will be a good reflection of what we can produce. But I think at the moment I don't think it's a rule that we're exclusively single pot still right now, but it's something that's where our goal is, and we want to kind of fly the flag for single pot still and perfect what we can on that. I don't see any, from my perspective, and I can only speak for myself, and Michael Scully might have other plans, but as far as I can say from our discussions, we're 100% focused on single pot still for now.
Fantastic. Mike has come in with another question, and I might rephrase his ever so slightly, but he's asking a nerdy question. He said that, not me. He says, is there much chemistry in whiskey making? He's thinking of chromatography, for example. I'm gonna maybe rephrase that and say, is there much active chemistry rather than, because pretty much the entire process is alchemical reactions. So take it as you wish, Oisin.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's chromatography is an interesting one. It's something I'm looking at the moment, and it's something we have looked at in the past as well. Obviously, yeah, whiskey is it's, you know, most, or if not, a lot of distillers in this industry will be from a chemical engineering background. So chemistry is an important part of the job. I think chromatography is a really interesting kind of science to kind of implement, because it gives us a kind of a traceable profile of our new make. And I think if married with say if I was to take a gas chromatography profile of our new make, and then say did the same for the same new make as it ages through the years and through the months, you can actually start to see how esters in real time are actually changing inside the cask and stuff like that. And I think if you have a base, I know some of the bigger distilleries who have their own labs and their own gas chromatography units can actually do this. So it's not just relying on the organoleptic character, but literally identifying what the key flavor components of a distillery actually are, or of the distillate actually are. So I'm actually very interested in looking at mapping those flavor contributions and seeing how they change over time, especially in maturation. I'm fascinated by the idea of how casks, how liquid matures. It's not just a matter of age; it's a matter of when to, say, disgorge a cask. You know, it comes in peaks and valleys. It's like it can change. It can be at a point where, you know, it could be 5 years and be ready, and then you test it again in 6 months, and it somehow, whatever's happened, it's gotten older, but it's not ready again, and you have to wait for another change. And obviously these esters are being transformed all the time in real, you know, and as they transform, they bind with other esters and they evaporate off or they change. And being able to maybe forecast these changes is really, I think, in the future of maturation study and things like that, are going to be vital. You know, equipment like gas chromatography would be great.
Well, fantastic. Oisin, thank you so much for your time. We have been tasting your 50/50 triple distilled single pot still new make, which was the winner of Ireland's Best New Make Spirit in 2020 at the World Whiskey Awards. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for showcasing your spirit, and I hope you've enjoyed your time with us here this evening.
Absolutely, Matt. Thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Well, I am delighted to be swooping onwards to another fantastic single pot still Irish whiskey. And this is where I'm going to stop the confusion. This is Dram number 1. So Mike, in the comments, we're going to number 1. That's what I've done here. We're going by the years they won the award. So this is the 2021, not only Ireland's best new make, but also the world's best new make whiskey. It is Boann Distillery's single pot still whiskey. And I am joined by head distiller Michael Walsh, also known as Michal Braddock. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Not so bad, Matt. How are you?
I am well. I am delighted to have you. We're having a very interesting evening so far, talking about new make, and we're only going to progress from here. Most people on the show are going to know who you are. You've been on a couple of times with some interesting Whistler products. Now we're going to talk about the new make spirit, obviously by your own hand. While I'm going to pour Dram number 1, I'm going to showcase this again. It's number 1, guys, into the glass. Why don't you give us a little rundown of what the mash bill is and how you make it, and then we'll jump into a little tasting as well.
Yeah, well, this is a single pot still mash bill as well, just as our first sample was, but we do use a slightly different mash bill. So this was 40% malt, 55% unmalted barley, and then there's 3.75% oats and 1.5% rye. So yeah, a little bit of oats and a little bit of rye as well. We have produced a wide array of mash bills here in Boann, using different variety or different ranges of oats, wheat, rye, as well as malted and unmalted barley. I can touch on that maybe in a little while, but this is our core mash bill. So this is the one that we make most of, and is probably the best representation of the style of distillate we're looking to produce, and what we're probably trying to become known for. So yeah, a pot still with a pot still. So it has 40% malt, a slightly higher than normal unmalted barley element. And I feel from our exploration of different mash bills, that's what really starts to bring in what I would consider very much a hallmark of the style, that viscosity and that spryness, that gingery spice that you don't tend to find with single malt whiskey. We found from our explorations, both with sensory analysis, and it's interesting to hear the question being asked, the chromatography element where we've put it to GC, you really start to see that that pot still spice start to develop as a flavor characteristic when you keep unmalted barley higher than malt as a proportion by about 10% as a minimum. So a lot of spice, and then we bring in some oats. We found from all of our experimentation as well that oats brings in some sweetness, and then you get a kick of funk from that rye. Rye at 1.25% might seem like a fairly minute amount of rye, but from the experiments or exploration we've done so far, we've found that rye as a flavor contribution packs the most punch at a smaller quantity. So it might, if it might seem like an insignificant quantity to be adding to have any sort of impact on the distillate, and that would probably be true if you were talking about wheat, oats, or unmalted barley. But even at very small quantities, you start to get that licorice kind of and that bit of funk, like I said, coming in from the rye as well.
And I will attest, I have tasted this mash bill with 5% oats and no rye, and then the 375 and 125 with the tiny addition of rye made a huge difference. Which again, I like, you mentioned, thought it would be a token bit of rye, should throw it in, you put it on the label. It actually made, and I'm looking at these I'm pointing as if you can see me on the screen. People are coming up with tasting notes, and we're going to jump in and have a little nose and a taste here now already. But I'm seeing a lot of ginger. I'm seeing that kind of raisin ginger spice, coming up on different people's tasting notes. And I think we're going to see probably through your descriptions where some of that is coming from. But I don't want to leave people without anything in their glass for too long. So I'm going to say slánta.
Yeah, so it's probably unfair, and that's one of the things that so to expand on what I said, we have produced so far in Boann over 30 different individually different mash bills containing proportions of oats, wheat, and rye up to 30%, and technically beyond, but we leave that. But pot still mash bills up to 30% oats, 30% wheat, 30% rye, and every sort of combination of each in between. We've put these mash bills to sensory analysis. We've thankfully were able to lean on the expertise of other distillers and master blenders around the country, as well as GC. But what we were able to find were there were certain patterns that developed when you moved different proportions of different grains. Malt is a big driving force of yields. You cannot get the conversions of sugar without the malt, but it does bring sweetness, tends to being like more plum, jam, fruit-like sweetness. A big thing with the malt and the malted and unmalted barley, they controlled the way that the other characteristics or the other grains tended to present themselves. So touched on oats bring sweetness. In high unmalted barley mash bills, that sweetness, as is in this, is like a sherbet icing sugar, like an artificial sweet flavor profile. In higher malted barley mash bills that we have produced, it's more of a fruit, or a fleshy fruit type sweetness that's presented through the oats, and then that rye is one that's less manipulated by the other grains. It's just that it's a bit of clove, licorice, and then something quite hard to nail down in any form of positive light or a positive tasting note. Some of the tasting notes have been fairly colorful, that for what we can pull from the rye. I find it a welcome addition. It adds that extra final layer of depth to the distillate, but there's something hard to pin down, and something a little bit funky that comes in from that little bit of kick of the rye as well.
So one of the things I wanted to touch on there was Oisin a moment ago was talking about the distillate he's currently running is 40 malt and 60 barley, and you're saying here on this, you're running with 40 malt as well, and you're saying that it needs that kick of malt for the conversion. Is 40 like a known threshold, or is it just coincidental that you're both on 40? Is 40 an intentional number, or?
Well, depending on, there are a number of factors that play into extract and yields, the diastatic power of the actual malt itself, and then how specific and how careful you are with temperatures. Using other grains other than malt, you will need to work your way through different temperature ranges, beta-glucan stands and protein rests, etc., that you wouldn't have to do for malt. Depending how careful you are on those, will impact how much, as well as pH and other factors, but that will impact how much of an extract you will be able to garner. But what we have found from in-house experiments, I suppose, or actual production, is that we tend to be able to garner similar levels of yield down to about 40% malted barley, but once we drop below 40%, there is somewhat of a drop off in yield. So there's that added benefit, but we're quality over quantity driven. So it's a worthwhile I suppose cost or expense to drop off in yield if it's if it adds the flavor profile to it. But of course, there's then the cutoff of 30% for the technical file. You can go no lower than 30% malted barley, but you do start to see a slight drop off, or more pronounced drop off in yield from 40% down to 30% malt.
It's probably useful to say at this point that as the technical file stands, which is also now known as a product specification sheet for the people that really want to get into EU law.
Glamorous name.
Yeah, I know, right? As it stands, single pot still is defined as a minimum of 30% malt. Sorry, no fly turning on my face. 30% malt, a minimum of 30% unmalted barley, and a maximum of 5% other grains. I know that there are an industry-wide petition to the Department of Agriculture to change that to a maximum of 30%, but as we stand, single pot still stands at 5% to want to be categorized by that. So that is, we're at the threshold with your pot still here now, Michael, with the 375.
So to be technical about it, this does classify or meet the specifications even in their current form. This would be classified as pot still whiskey, but we do make other mash bills that are pot still mash bills, whether the technical file says so or not. But that would have ratios of grain up unto 30%. But there's fairly good authority on the technical file being changed in the near future. But until the day it actually changes, these distillates won't, by the letter of law, be classified as pot still. But they do fall into the flavor characteristics, and the flavor characteristics for pot still. What sets pot still whiskey apart from other styles, particular malt, and even more so single grain for me, is that viscosity. It's a denser liquid, better able to carry flavor profile. It has a denser mouthfeel. Its mouth coating has this capacity.
Why is it more viscous?
it's what the actual science behind it, I'm not exactly sure. There's something that happens by using more unmalted barley in particular. It people that are beer drinkers among us might probably think that follows true as well for oats. If you ever drink an oatmeal stout, it's a big, thick, viscous liquid. That's not necessarily the case. The oats doesn't bring in the same level of viscosity as unmalted barley does, or even wheat, as far as distillate is concerned. But yeah, it does have this. It is a more dense liquid than single malt, and this density of structure allows it to carry, in my opinion, a lot more flavor profile, a more balanced flavor profile. And these flavor profiles tend to be sweet, which you can find across single grain and single malt styles, but that ginger crackle, that spryness, that spice that you won't find in your malt, particularly when you start to go beyond a 50-50 mash bill. When you start to bring in higher proportions of unmalted barley in particular, you get a lot more of that spice, which I am very, very fond of. And so that's why the vast majority of what we do here in Boann is chasing after that flavor profile. And that's probably most evident in this distillate style that we produce, although we do produce a multitude of other distillate styles. This is the one that follows into that stereotypical, or that if there is a stereotypical pot still style of dense, almost chewable liquid that has this sweetness but that unmistakable kick of spice as well. So yeah, that's why this is the core mash bill and the distillate that we make most of from a day-to-day basis.
And your adjuncts that you're using, the oats and the rye, they're unmalted. That's correct.
Yeah, that's all.
Everything except the
all
malted
intents and
barley.
purposes, all of the adjunct grains are unmalted. We get all of our grains. It's difficult to get oats, wheat, and rye because they're not too commonly used in distilleries or even in breweries any longer. So you can't really go to the maltsters or your grain suppliers and ask for distilling grade oats, wheat, and rye. So for that reason, we have worked with local farmers, the Lochrans and the McKeowns. So we basically have a working relationship where they grow the grains for us and then harvest them, dry them, and then we use them as we wish, but they're unmalted. But the diastatic power or the conversion power happens from the malted element anyway, so it's not really necessary for them to be malted. There's probably a whole range of flavor differences that could become more evident. We haven't done the same level of experimentation with malted oat, sweet, or malted adjuncts as we have with the unmalted adjuncts. So it's a whole nother
Listen,
can of worms.
Listen, you've already done 30 mash bills and you've got half of them scientifically analyzed. So perhaps a different distillery can look into.
Yeah. Somebody else can work on the malted grain.
So absolutely fantastic. I see a lot of people are really excited about this. The Boann Distillery new make single pot still spirit, 40 malt, 55 barley, 3.75 oats, and 1.25% rye. This is what you can buy on Irish Malts. If you pop up the bottle, that's the lovely packaged bottle you see there in 200 mils. I know though that your third birthday is coming up this December. Are we going to is a Boann Distillery single pot still on the horizon, or is that still a little ways out like Clonakilty?
So the winter solstice this year we'll have technically produced whiskey, and we'll mark the occasion by releasing something. So you were a colleague of mine at the time when we filled those casks, rather hungover after a staff party, a Christmas party.
It was our Christmas party, yeah.
Christmas party, yeah, and then we filled all those casks, and yeah, it's 3 years since that fateful day, and so we have now produced whiskey. We'll mark the occasion. We'll have a party, and we are intending on releasing a pot still whiskey in the near future. All Boann whiskies the vast majority, or all Boann whiskies will for the foreseeable will be pot still whiskies. And so on the horizon is a Boann release. It won't be a very broadly available release. It won't be a mass release. It is just 3 years old. We are very happy, very, very happy with where the distillate is as a new make. We are very happy where it is at as a 2 and a bit year old. So we would be happy to release, and we'll release small quantities. But to be fair to the distillate, we're going to probably leave it mature a little bit longer before we start to see anything of any large quantity. So apologies in advance to the good people watching along. It's very unlikely that too many of these bottles will actually make their way to Irish malls or into hands, because there simply won't be much that will be released. But we are at that threshold. It's a long 3 years. I've done it twice now. It's my second distillery. I've suffered through the purgatory of 3 years, and so the end is near. But how much will actually start to be released in the next few months or year or so remains to be seen. But yeah.
Well, I'll ask you one last question, and then I'll let you go, because I know you're still in the distillery talking to us. You have to get home at some point. But we've tasted the Clonakilty new make, fantastically drinkable without a day in wood. We've now tasted the Boann new make, fantastically drinkable and flavorful without a day in wood. In your mind, is pot still like new make? Will it mature faster than malt in terms of, there's a lot, in my opinion, there's a lot of flavor here compared to a lot of the malt new makes I've tasted. The casks perhaps have to do a little less work, a little bit less legwork in terms of adding flavor.
Yes, So the work of the cask, or the theory behind cask maturation, is that the cask has to do two things. It has to round off harsh edges and any real impurities or like sulfurous components, etc. And the second thing is to layer on flavor profile. How long you have to wait to where you get to a place that you have enough of the undesirable character stripped off and enough flavor profile laid on from the cask is kind of how long is a piece of string type question. The thing I would say beyond that is that we, as a distillery in Boann, and this is somewhat of an ethos that most of the distillers have to have in Ireland, because most of the distilleries are new. We are working with the thing that we want to try and shorten the requirement for maturation as much as possible, reality, because we want to start garnering back our money. So we have to be we're probably a lot more careful than other more longer established distilleries. If a distillery knows that it's going to go into cask for 10 years, they're maybe not as careful with their distillation method, leaving some rough edges there, knowing that the cask work will be there to round it off. I think it's a testament to the quality of distiller that's operating in Ireland that many of these distillates that are being produced before they go into cask are drinkable and are, to put it mildly, drinkable. They're incredibly good distillates, not needing to be rounded off or to really have to go to spend time in cask. And then as a style, like I said earlier, pot still whiskey carries that extra bit of body, that extra bit of flavor profile. So it's not as reliant on the cask to add that extra depth. Certainly the cask will add depth and has actually more of a structure to build on pot still, but you probably reach that threshold a hell of a lot sooner than you will with other styles. Like single grain as a style doesn't need as long a maturation because it's a cleaner distillate to begin with, but it needs it because it is probably thin on flavor profile. Single malt, and particularly maybe double distilled malts, need a lot of cleaning up, but maybe not the same level of flavor profile. But pot still whiskey, in particular the styles that are being made by ourselves and Pearse, Lyons and Clonakilty, as it probably hopefully been proven and or continue to be proven this evening, are very drinkable going into cask and have a lot of flavor. So I think non-age statement and younger pot still whiskies does not necessarily need to come with a government health warning that they're going to be any lesser in quality than some older age statement whiskies.
It's funny because I mentioned on occasion the software we're using. I can see Oisin and Michael, and no one else can see them. And as you're talking, Michael and Oisin are both beaming and nodding along as you're going. So I think for me, the future is bright for pot still. I think we're going to see a lot of flavor in particular coming out of distilleries with these pot still whiskies, in particular what we've already tasted and what I'm sure we're about to taste from Pearse Lyons. We've seen the evolution from the 50-50 in 2020 to this vicariously mixed mash bill 2021. Not only Ireland's best new make, but also took home the world's best new make title as well. So I commend you on spirit well made, Michael, and I'm sure everyone in the comment section is very much enjoyed. So
thank you very much for the compliment. Before you cut me off, I do want to pass on a compliment to Oisin Mulcahy, who was on just before me. He did very well. This is the first time I think on 3 Drams, because as he mentioned, he's only been made head distiller very recently. I'm very excited to see what happens. I'll always claim, if he does great things anyway, I will, that I gave him his start. I hired Oisin as his first job in distillation. So I'm very happy to see that he's now been given the reins. Very excited. He was always a passionate guy. He went home and did home brewing and came in and had great ideas of his own that I'm very excited to see come to, that I may have ignored as he came into me with, but I'm very excited to see him put into practice now with a distillery that at his disposal. So and lovely matching Clonakilty Ganseys by the two of you. The orange, are they company issue or is it just?
Listen, it's Halloween, Michael.
Yeah,
we're just being festive, and we had to match Michael Carr's beard to the jumpers as well. But well, Michael, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, and of course, enjoy your samples of the distillate we're about to taste as we go along, and thank you once again.
Thanks again for having me on.
Well, I am delighted to be moving on to our third spirit of the night. This is the 2022 best Irish new make. It is from Pearse Lyons Distillery, and I am joined by Michael Carr, who has a fancy new company name. It's over here. Camera's reversed. Lyons Brewing and Distilling Company, Michael. For those that don't know, including me, who corrected you at the beginning erroneously, tell us of the name change while I pour Dram number 3. We're back on schedule. It took us to the end, but we got back on the right ones. Dram number 3.
I'll be completely honest with you. I was on a week's holidays last week, and I came back on Monday to notice that my email signature had changed, because I obviously check that every time. It's a very strange thing to do. Mark Lyons announced last week that we're Lyons Brewing and Distilling now, as opposed to what we were before, Alltech Beverages and things like that. We've kind of been, we're still Mark Lyons still is our president and everything, but we're on our own 2 feet now. So kind of have to make money and keep producing excellent spirit and stuff like that.
It's terrible when they tell companies to make money, isn't it?
I don't know. I'm just I'm an idealist. I think we should just do it for fun. But if my boss is watching right now, which I am absolutely 100% sure he is watching, yes, boss, no problem. We'll make loads of money.
Yeah, that's how we tell them. Now, the one thing I want to say is Pearse Lyons Distillery won Best Irish New Make. And it's almost what we have in bottle number 3. And I'm going to tell you up front, because we physically couldn't get the spirit, because you lads made it once.
Yeah.
And then not again. And the difference in what we're tasting now, we have another mixed mash bill single pot still here. It's with malted adjuncts, which is very cool. We see the juxtaposition against what we just tasted from Boann. But what one was in at least some degree peated. Mm-hmm. What we're tasting is the exact same distillate, same mash bill, but unpeated.
Yeah.
And that very much came down to the fact that you literally made it once. So it would have been, we would have been drinking spirit that was halfway to becoming whiskey against the 2 new makes. So we've in all fairness to everything else, the exact same mash bill, just unpeated. I think we're at a happy solution here.
Yeah. So, well, and what you're tasting actually won the Spirits Business Gold award for best new make and young spirit. So it is an award, worldwide award-winning best Irish.
It's look, it's double awards here. This
Yeah.
is what we want. Listen, Michael, I'm going to tell you right now, 3 Drams does nothing if not the best. All right.
That's it.
We've got technically it's even 4 best Irish new makes at this point, but
there you go. Well,
yes.
look, we what happened was we were experimenting during one of the lockdowns, and Connor was asked to submit something, and he literally went into a drawer, pulled out a bottle, went, "That's what we're doing right now, isn't it?" and sent it off. And they were the next week changing over to what you guys are tasting. So basically, that way, what it was peated, not extremely highly peated, 55 ppm, but exactly the same constituents: 60% malted barley, 35% unmalted barley, and 5% oats. That adds up. Yeah, malted oats. So that's, again, just as a slight difference to what the guys are doing in Boann. And the reason for that was very simple. When we were using unmalted oats, the grain was too long. It was getting stuck in our heat exchanger. It was as simple as that. So when we got malted oats, and it just worked better. Also, for us, we were getting a slightly better yield with the malted oats. So it gave us a little bit more. And I suppose at the end of the day, it gave us a little boost of sweetness as well. Now, the oats will always add sweetness, but there's a little bit of kind of a candy cane sweetness that comes in extra from the malted oats.
Well, what we're going to do is I'm going to say Sláinte. I'm going to cheers my camera here. I'm going to have a little nose, a little taste. For those who have not yet dove into the glass, please do so now. I have already seen David jumping in saying, "Oh my word." So I'm hoping I say the same, and then I'm hoping you tell us about this distillate and growing your own grains, and I'll hear about all that stuff in a moment. So
yeah, let's have a little. I suppose for us, our on the nose, we probably aren't as equivalent to the previous pot stills because they've so much more unmalted barley, and that brings you that kind of classic pot still nose. Our nose is a little bit more, I suppose, tropical. You still get the dark fruits and the spices, but I like that. There's a party happening in somebody's mouth. That we're very happy with that. And then I suppose flavor-wise, because we have so much more malt in it, there's going to be that extra maltiness. You're going to have your kind of orchard fruits as well coming in there.
And what I am liking about this is we're seeing 3 very different worlds of pot still. You know, you're down the middle 50-50. You're out there low malt plus a load of adjuncts, and now we're here with high malt, and we're really intentionally or unintentionally showcasing the breadth that this category has, because all of this is still pot still. It's still recognizably pot still, and it's all fucking delicious, and it's best spirit in Ireland. 3 years,
and to have 3 years of 3 pot stills that are unique. Each one of them are utterly unique. It kind of shows where the Irish pot still category can go. Like we have mature pot still. I think in 3 weeks we'll have mature pot still, I'm gonna
stop you. You have mature pot still for about the last 6 weeks, because I was sent Conor Ryan sent me the cask number. He was surprised. He found it one day when I was talking to him on the phone, and he accidentally found a cask. He have at least one cask of 3-year-old.
Yeah. And there's literally one cask. Because they dumped a load into a cask, and they had nowhere to put the cask. Genuinely, they had literally nowhere to put the cask. So they held it. And Jack O'Shea, who was our distiller at the time, now this is a story I've heard. You'd have to confirm it with Jack, but he had a chat with what do you call them in Wexford?
Staffords.
He had a chat with Michael Stafford saying, "You have a bonded warehouse. Can we store whiskey there?" And Michael Stafford was like, "We don't store whiskey. Let me see what the legalities of it. So we had to wait. We literally dumped stuff into a cask, and then we had to wait for, I think it was about 5-6 weeks until Stafford's had sorted themselves out. We'd literally a load of casks sitting in our warehouse in Dundalk, and we just didn't want to dump whiskey into them. So there is one very special cask that nobody's ever going to try.
Well, look, that's the special stuff of any distillery, isn't it? There's always a few casks, and that's how you end up with single casks.
Yeah. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Connor made that cask disappear, and it might be at the back of a shed somewhere down in
Well, I am loving tasting this, and I'm really enjoying the differentiation of it. A few people might not realize as well that the Pearse Lyons Distillery is about to hit its whiskey's 10th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about all these, the 3-year thresholds and whatnot. Pearse Lyons Distillery's been chucking, pumping it out for a while.
We have.
Mainly malt for quite a bit, but I know obviously we're tasting pot still, so we're tasting different spirits here. But almost at the 10th birthday. That's going to be
in a few weeks as well. We started distilling. Well, when Dr. Lyons bought the site in Dublin, it took an awful long time for it to be fixed up. Really, his plan was to just drop distills into it, start distilling, fix around it. But Dublin City Council had different ideas, and they decided that it had to be fully restored as opposed to redeveloped. So Dr. Lyons talked to his friends in O'Hara's and said, "You just built an extension. Can I stick my stills into the back of your extension? You won't need it for a few years." And we started distilling in Carlow in 2012. And I think that they'll be, I think in 2 or 3 weeks we'll have 10-year-old single malt. I'd love to tell you we're releasing it, but we're not. We have 5-year-olds. We have a new 5-year-old single malt coming out from Dublin. So we have 5-year-old malt from the site in Dublin. We want to get that out first, and then we'll look at maybe doing the 10-year-old single malt. The pot still definitely won't be out for a while.
Well, I think it's funny as well that that the Carlow site, where the distillery was kind of very quietly and unassumingly producing spirit for, I don't know how many years you were in Carlow for.
3.5, I think.
So, I mean, clever of Dr. Lyons to set up there before going to Dublin. But I also find interesting is it's the first mothballed distillery, technically, in Ireland in a long time. So when you if anyone is fortunate enough to taste Carlow distilled malt, technically you're tasting it from a dead distillery, because Pearse Lyons Distillery is theoretically, while the exact same stills and the same people and the same fermentation equipment, it's technically by law a different distillery.
So basically, we could do a blended malt from 2 technically different distilleries, but the same stills.
But they're both Pearse Lyons.
They're both Pearse Lyons. So we internally call the distillery in Carlow the Alltech Distillery, because it was very much part of the Alltech process at the time, and that's where Jack O'Shea came through Alltech, and then the Dublin site we call the Pearse Lyons Distillery. So we have lots of what we call Alltech malt. We've loads of that, and we have released the 5-year-old single malt. Maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago at this stage. So we have that. That was a distillery reserve. There was a cast strength version of that in Dublin Airport, and that stuff now is nearly 10 years old. We'd have a lot of stuff that's just exclusively bourbon barrels, and a big chunk of stuff that's in the different Lexington Town Branch Brewery beer barrels as well, because we have got the distillery over in the US, so we're kind of lucky with that.
It's tough having multiple distilleries, isn't it?
Well, we're up to 3 whiskey distilleries. Don't ask me about tequila and other things. There's loads of those hidden somewhere, I presume in Mexico, but God knows. There's a few other distilleries in there as well, but we've the 3 whiskey distilleries.
Well, that's a lot of fun. So for you, let's go back to this, and you make 67%, by the way. Is that the casking strength in PLD?
No, we'll drop them down to about 63.5 for casking. The reason it's 67% is because we took these samples for competition. We took them directly from the distillery. So when we are distilling, it goes from about 60 to about 72%. So in the storage container at the back of the distillery, it comes out at about 63%. So 67%. So that's what
we're tasting unadulterated spirit here. So remind us of the mash bill, because it's so fantastic to see the three different mash bills we've had tonight.
60% malted barley. All of the malt is grown on our own farm in Dunboyne in County Meath. It's only about 25 kilometres from the distillery. We have Loughran's, who are farm managers for us. So we've heard Loughran's mentioned before. They are probably the industry leaders in what they do. And so they malt it for us. They malt that barley for us. We're using Splendor at the moment. We're just having a bit of crack with that. We also are growing out there wheat, oats and rye. We tried a bit of corn a few years ago, but it just wasn't good.
I mean, Ireland, not the most famous for its maize.
Oh, exactly. We thought we'd just give it a go, just to prove everybody wrong, but they were all proven right. So 60% malted barley, malted by Loughran's for us. 35% unmalted barley, so just fresh barley, and then 5% malted oats. And again, we grow those ourselves, and Loughran's malt those for us.
And Loughran's are fantastic. I've had James Loughran on before. He actually did an entire podcast with his phone on a tripod in a rye field, which was... He said to me, and it was very funny because they're a fantastic company, and I love them because they're a family company, really innovating really hard and supplying a lot of distilleries really interesting spirit, really interesting grains. But he told me, I'm gonna do it from the field, and I went, don't, that's a terrible idea. He's like, no, I'm gonna do it from the field, and then he just didn't contact me again until he was in a field, and actually went really well. It was actually one of the most enjoyable podcasts I've done. So, for this spirit we're tasting here, I presume it'll be laid down for a while. Is this in regular rotation? Is this one of the core mash bills?
This is our core mash bill. Now we've just changed off it last week to something we kind of a bit of an experimentation. After we do our core mash bill, so we'll do a core malt and we'll do a core pot still, and they basically go in for it really depends on what we need at the time and forecasting and stuff like that, but they go in for long months and months and months, and then immediately afterwards we'll play around for a month or two. So we've put some stuff in now, non-GI pot still, and again, like the lads were saying, we'll just see where it goes, where the industry goes with that. But we're playing around with some stuff for the next few weeks, and then we'll change back over to single malt.
Well, I think the future of single pot still, at least in Ireland, is bright with this on the cards. Michael, thank you so much for your time this evening, representing the newly named or renamed Lyons Brewing and Distilling Company. But you have assured me that the distillery is still called the distillery building.
Still Pearse Lyons. Still Pearse whiskey. We haven't forgotten. He's as the only person in the world that's in both the Irish, I suppose, Whiskey Hall of Fame, was it the President's Award or whatever it is, and then the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame. We're very proud of him. Even just the barley, the yeast we use was the yeast that he literally made for our whiskey. So he's in everything we do.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, thank you so much to not only you, but of course, Oisin with Clonakilty's 50/50 pot still, and of course, Michael Walsh with Boann's fantastic mixed mash bill, single pot still. To everyone in the comments section, get putting in there right now. Give us your 1, 2, 3. What are your favorite spirits you've been having? Because this has been an amazing tasting. It's been this is our 2-year anniversary of 3 Drams that you've all been coming and listening to me yammer on about whiskey. Probably this has been my most enjoyable tasting. I think I've been very excited about this. Let us know in the comment section what is your 1, 2, 3. What has been your most favorite, if you can decide, because it's always different. It's always fun to see. And if you are a 3 Drams subscriber, make sure to check out your inbox because John from Irish Malts, who is the mastermind behind 3 Drams, he has dropped into your inbox a lovely bundle deal from all 3 distilleries altogether. It is not the new makes. The only commercially available new make is the Boann Distillery. You can find that on 3 Drams, or you find it on Irish Malts even. But this is still a fantastic deal and offer from the guys at Irish Malts. So let us know in the comments section. I'm seeing some numbers coming in already. They're all subjective. No one's going to have their feelings hurt because they're all different and we love it. So to Michael, and Oisin, a very big thank you. To everyone watching at home, thank you very much. I hope you have a great night and we'll see you next month for episode 25. Rav Mila.